Okay. So as mentioned, I'll once again repeat. Okay. So as we know that the first thing what we define is we know how humanism plays.
Just a minute. Sorry to bother you. Participants, now Fensta ma'am would not be able to see the chat box. She is seeing only her screen. So it's a humble request. If you have any questions, keep your questions parked till end of the session. We will be able to address your questions in last 10 minutes of the session. So if you type anything in chat box, she would not be able to see it right now. Okay, so humble request to keep your questions parked with yourselves. We will address your queries towards the end of the session. Thank you.
Right, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So now as we saw about how humanism plays a major role, we saw that humanism is actually an ethical philosophy where we talk about how the dignity and the worth of people is being defined, and how we know as in how the universal human qualities, particularly rationality, plays a major role here. And humanism as a whole, when we talk about, it's how it's actually a commitment for the truth and also the morality, and how human needs are actually being fulfilled based on the support of the human interest. So now when we talk about the other things, as in how humanism, what are the other things that the humanism actually rejects? So when we talk about the rejection of humanism, the first thing is about the transcendental justification, as in how without any reason we blindly tend to believe it. Okay. And the next what we see is next what we can deal with, how the supernatural or the divine origin, that also we blindly follow it. So these all how the humanism is being rejected. Okay. And then we see how the universal morality is based on the condition, human condition, especially how it acts as a solution for the cultural problems. So this is how the humanism is being portrayed when we talk about the humanist perspective. So here there are some questions when before moving to the post-humanism. Okay. So what is actually the post-human condition in the 21st century? Okay. And is post-humanism becoming very popular because without how human things are not possible, and how it's now, how everything has become impossible. Impossible has become possible, how it is being defined that. And now we know how the digital technologies, okay, the digital technologies had completely metamorphized the human's life, that is through WhatsApp, through Facebook, or through LinkedIn, how we are directly being able to connect. So how this digital revolution has completely metamorphosed the human lives in this 20th century. So is that the reason that we are currently focusing on the post-humanism? That is a big question. So now we'll move on to how the post-humanism is being represented as in life beyond the self. So when we talk about the life beyond the self, the picture that is being portrayed here, you all know it's actually the Vitruvian man that is being actually been propounded by a famous painter, that is Leonardo da Vinci. So before moving to the Vitruvian man, we have to first know as in what is this life beyond the self? How is post-humanism is being dealt with when we talk about the life beyond the self? So the term he is actually being defined as the classical idea of man that has been actually first formulated by the Protagoras. Okay, and he's the one who has come with the concept of measure of all things. And when we talk about the measure of all things, this was actually being renewed by the Italian Renaissance, and that was actually when Leonardo da Vinci came up with the Vitruvian man, the painter. Okay, so Vitruvian man, you know, it's a ideal of bodily imperfection, as in it's about the mental, discursive, and spiritual values. Okay, so this is how the Vitruvian man is completely being defined. And this iconic image, when we see this iconic image, it actually represents the emblem of humanism. So how does it represent the emblem of humanism? Is that it is through the biological, through the discursive, and how the human capabilities are completely transformed. Okay, so this is how the Vitruvian man plays a major role here. And the next one, what we see here is that how this human capabilities has been completely transformed into the teleological or the rational process of human. Okay, so there are certain things, how there are some restrictions that have been imposed on the human. So that is one famous critic as well as a philosopher whom we can see here is Edward Said. So Edward Said, we all know He's American philosopher, a political activist who's famous for the work of Orientalism. So here what he says that is that humanism, when we talk about in the post-colonial age, he tells them there are so many suppressed language and cultures that has been represented, and those are not and those are explainable, and that is in different locations with regards to the centers, then also the margins, and how that is a multi-facet of humanism is being represented. So this is how Edward Said has come up in a post-colonial perspective. He deals with the humanism. And next, what we see is here is that the genocides and crimes. So genocides and crimes, on the one hand, we can see how the hopes and aspirations to the freedom is being there. And on the other hand, we see how humanism completely defeats the linear criticism. So this is what we see about how the life beyond the self is being represented. That is through the painting of Leonardo da Vinci's The Vitruvian Man. So now we'll come across the next concept in posthumanism is the anti-humanism. So this anti-humanism is actually it's a part and parcel of posthumanism concept, and this was actually brought in the year 1960s and 1970s. Okay, and it was developed by other new movements and cultures that we see about the feminism, the decolonization, then the anti-racism and anti-nuclear. So these are some of the movements where we see how this anti-humanism is being propagated. Okay, so when we talk about from an ideological context, we see anti-humanism deals with the two historical phenomena. So the one is fascism and the other one is communism. So these both, as in when we talk about the fascism and communism, that is where we see how it actually rejects the European humanism and how it actually betrays them violently. Okay, so this is what we see, the two historical phenomena that's very important when we talk about the anti-humanism, that is fascism and communism. And the next important thing that we come across, the communist humanism, which is also a part of anti-humanism. We see how actually the first thing is that it actually brings about a disastrous effects of fascism. And the next thing what we see, it's about the intellectual history, as in how the period of fascism and Nazism is being enacted and how that is being brought in with a historical critical theory. So there are some other theories, as in some other schools of thought, that this critical theory in Europe that they actually banned was that is actually Marxism. So in the beginning, you can see when this anti-humanism was actually prevalent, these are some of school of thought that actually being banned in the Europe. So that is what we see is Marxism, then psychoanalysis and Frankfurt School. So these are some of the things that was actually banned. And the famous theorist, as we all know, Edward Said, he tells about what does he define anti-humanism, that he states that the intellectual part of anti-humanism is that it is a widespread revolution with the Vietnam War. That is how he defines anti-humanism. So there are also other theorists like Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir, where they both talk about how the humanistic universalization, it's acting as a distinctive trait when it comes to the Western culture. So there are other critics that has also been brought in with the concept, and also they actually confront with this philosophy. Is that what do they say is that they treat that anti-humanism is like their own historical responsibilities and how the power breaking is actually being denoted. So that is what we see when we talk about the anti-humanism. And then you all know that Simone de Beauvoir, she is one of the famous feminists who actually talk about the humanist principle, where she defines the new Vitruvian woman. So before we saw it's about the Vitruvian man, so now Simone de Beauvoir comes up with a new concept that is known as the new Vitruvian woman. So how does she define the new Vitruvian woman? Is that the woman is a measure of all things, the female. So that is how she defines it. And next we see as in how this Vitruvian woman is being represented from a humanist feminism. So Vitruvian woman, we all know it's the theoretical aspect of the practice of synthesis of self and others. And this Vitruvian female was actually put forward by Simone de Beauvoir, and it is a critical reflection and also the political paradox that is being aligned with the second wave feminism of 1960s. So this humanist feminism is actually the embodiment of the new and the analysis of power. So power plays a major role when we talk about the humanist feminism. So the next thing is that how anti-humanism has been having a connection with the humanist feminism. So anti-humanism, you see, it comes across with so many radical thinkers who's been radical thinkers, especially the post-structuralist generation. Okay, they actually has a unique way of thinking and how they understand the human subjectivity. That is actually different. So some of the post-structural thinkers, they were against this anti-humanism, and their way of understanding is completely different with that of the human subjectivity. So some of the post-structural thinkers which I put forward in the PPT, as you all know, it's Mikkel Foucault, The Order of Things. And this order of things, you know, where he questions the idea of anything. So be it the idea of human, whether it's again the political groups or radical discourses, how we actually put forward the idea of the human concepts. That's what we see in Mikkel Foucault, The Order of Things. And the next one we see, it's about the same author. As you all know, Foucault is famous for The Death of Man. So in The Death of Man, he tells about how the life as well as how the human goes beyond the binary oppositions and how they take a different poles when we talk about the political spectrum. So this is how The Death of Man mainly focuses, as in we talk about the epistemological or moral crisis, where it deals with the binary opposition from a different poles of political spectrum. And then you come across the other famous feminist writer, that is Lucy Irigaray. So Lucy Irigaray, a famous feminist writer, who tells that, who put forward the idea of the man, as in she tells that the abstract ideal of man is that he's been represented as a symbol of classical humanity. Okay, as in how the men have been represented, like whether he's a white or a black or European or Indian, handsome or able-bodied. So these are some of the things that is being represented. Okay. And when we talk about the anti-colonial thinkers, the one such anti-colonial thinker is Frantz Fanon. So when we talk about Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth, it's actually a famous text where he tells them how humanism is being completely rescued from the European perpetuals, as in how that art of humanism is being able to connect with the inhumanity. That is, for example, the things that how we can see in Wretched of Earth is that the yellow and black voices, how they talk about the humanism and how they reproach with the inhumanity concept. That is what we see in the humanist feminism. And then the famous work, that Death of Man, where we see it's about the anti-fascist, then post-communist and post-colonial. So these are some of the things that is being represented there. So the next slide is The Death of Man and Deconstruction of Human. So Death of Man, as you all know, it's been put forward by the Mikkel Foucault. So here you see how actually the definition of human is brought in. Okay, so human, how the human has been defined is that human has been a normative convention where we see it's not only doesn't make the human as a negative or a highly regulatory man who practices everything, but apart from that, there is some exclusion of discrimination. So there are three definitions that we see, three terms that has been actually associated with the human norm. So these are some of the three terms that we talk about the human norm. The first is the normality, then we come across the normalcy and normativity. So these are the three different terms that is associated when we talk about the human norms. Okay, so basically these three norms tells about how actually the transcendent values of human are represented. That is, from example, we can just have it like from male to masculine, and how it has been onto human, and how the format of humanity has been done. So these are that's how these terms define us. And then you come across how the humans are represented as a historical construct. So when we talk about the historical construct, we see how they have been completely changed to a social convention because of the human nature. So this is how the humans that we see as in human are, as in how the definition of human is being defined. We saw. Next is the feminist anti-humanism. So this feminist anti-humanism is known as the postmodern feminist. So what is this postmodern feminist? So with this postmodern feminist is that they completely reject the identities that's been focused on the ideal of man. So anti-humanism, as we all know, that they completely reject the ideal scheme, the dialectical scheme of humanism, where we come across the difference, the others, then how the sexualized other women are represented, how the rationalized other men are represented, and actualized others. So these are some of the three different terms. So when we talk about the sexualized other, that is where we come across the women, how women are actually represented. Then we talk about the racialized other, where we see the native members or the native people who lives them. And next we come across the naturalized others. So this naturalized others is where you come across the embodiment of animals, environment that is on the earth. So this is how the three different things that's being represented. So next we will see what are the other theories that has been associated with the posthumanism, as in with the anti-humanism. So the Friedrich Nietzsche's Death of God and Michael Foucault, The Death of Man, End of Man. And then three other important works, that is Francis Fukuyama and Decline of Ideologies. So these three important works where we see as it mainly focuses on humanism and how the political perspective of humanism is being represented. So when we talk about the political perspective of humanism, that is where we come across how the liberal side of individualism brought in, how they have been completely going through the autonomy and self-determination. Okay, so these are three important terms that we see when we are connected to these books. Okay, that is from a humanist point of view, that is individualism, the autonomy, and self-determination. So these humanism, they also promote all this solidarity, then community bonding, and how the principles of equality has been represented. So these are some of the things that they also promote. Okay, so when it comes to science and culture, they also have a dogmatic representation of how the holy text and religious dogma has been represented and why they don't include it. Okay, and the next, when we see it's anti-humanism, it's about how the humanist image of man is brought in with the problematic counterparts. So when we talk about the problematic counterparts, that's where we see across how the individual is being completely connected to egotism and self-centeredness, and then how self-determination is being turns into arrogance and dominance. Okay, and then science, we all know we are not free from it. So that is how these three terms is being defined as a problematic counterparts for the anti-humanism. So to overcome the humanism, there are three approaches, that is the tradition, the normative, and the institution. So these are some of the things that we need to follow. So the next one we see as in how the end of humanism. Okay, so now we all know how humanism plays a major role and how anti-humanism was actually prevalent during the period. And now we come across as in how the end of humanism is being brought in. So this end of humanism is where you come across how it is being subjected to human control, whether it can be present or whether it can be past or in the future. So this is how the end of humanism is being subjected to how the capacity of the human bodies are represented in the present, the past, and the future. So as we all know, Carrie Wolf, a post-humanist philosopher like Rosi Braidotti and Francesca Ferrando, so she has put forward in a book that is a famous book, that is What is Posthuman. She tells them how actually the posthuman has been brought in with the historical violence and how the posthuman condition is being brought in with the human enhancement. So this is how she defines the potential of the posthuman condition. So now we come across what is posthuman. So before all, as in from the starting of the session, we see as in how humanism has been playing a major role, and then how anti-humanism plays a major role, and how the end of humanism is brought in. So now we'll see as in how the concept posthuman and posthumanism is being defined. So posthuman, as we all know, it's a deconstruction of human. So this posthuman as in is being associated with different schools of thought. So first, you'll know that posthumanism is a philosophical movement that addresses the notion of posthuman. So that has been actually been divided into three different types, that is critical posthumanism, cultural posthumanism, and philosophical posthumanism. So these are three different concepts that's actually been associated when we talk about the posthumanism. The next one, what we see is that posthumanism and transhumanism are two different concepts that has been interlinked. So the transhumanism, you can see that has three different branches that's been associated to it. So one is democratic transhumanism, then second one is libertarian transhuman and extropianism. Okay. And last but not the least, we come across there are also other terms that has been connected to posthuman. The one is anti-humanism, then new materialism,
Ma'am,
and yeah.
can you explain the terms in a simpler way, because it's getting little difficult for me to grasp the concepts. Um,
Okay, maybe
And
in the end,
please go a little slow, ma'am.
okay, okay. So, as we all know, these are three different concepts that we see. As in, when we talk about the anti-humanism, this new materialism, and because of these concepts, I'll be dealing in the next presentation, as in the coming up sessions. That's why. So, these three concepts, as in when we talk about the terms that has been actually associated with the posthumanism, is that there are other concepts that has been actually interlinked, that is anti-humanism, the new materialism, and metahumanism. So these are actually three different concepts, and in future, as in tomorrow's session, I'll be dealing in as in how these concepts are actually being associated with the posthumanism. So post-human, you all know, it's a redefined notion of human that we talk about in the 21st century. So how this is being defined is that it's being dealt with three aspects, that is through the concept of Darwin evolution, then cyber technology, and ecological Anthropocene. So these are different things that we see. As in when we talk about cyborgs, you know, it's a combination of humans and machines. And ecological Anthropocene is completely associated with the environment and how that plays a major role here. So next, what we'll be seeing is about the science and technology studies. So this science and technology studies, we'll see as in more connected to the science fiction, where we see as in how the technologies like AI or cyborgs, how that is being directly connected to the post-human concept. So this post-human, you know, it's actually been put in a simple words, we know it's a deconstruction of human. So when this post-humanism, there are other things that we also see, as in we saw about anti-humanism, but now we'll see as in analytic posthumanism. So what is this analytic posthumanism? So analytic posthumanism is actually being put forward by the famous critic, that is Peter Paul Verbeek. So this Peter Paul Verbeek is whom we see, he talks about how the human subjects is being simplified and how the technology is being connected to the posthumanism. So these are the two things that we see. And then you come across post-dualism. So when we talk about post-humanism itself, there are so many concepts that we have to deal with. So this concept, as in post-dualism, you know, it's being defined by the technologies, as in technologies like how we come across the digital humanities, the AI. So all those things, how this post-dualism is being defined through the technologies. That is what we see about post-dualism. And this post-humanism, you know, it's about how it questions the human condition and how the human acts as a whole. Okay, how it needs a separate category. Okay, that's what we see. And then the human, how the human is being actually being criticized, or how they have been having a direct connection with the other concepts like colonialism, sexism, or race, how the human is being connected to these things. So that's what we see here. And we also see there's another term that is known as the non-human. So what is this non-human? So this human, okay, the human as a whole, we see they are being completely, at times they have been oppressed. So when they are being oppressed, okay, that is through the historical concepts or anything, they have been completely considered as a non-human. So there are other terms that is also be seen. So I don't want to go elaborate on that because that actually has a confusion with it. So only the non-human we'll see. So non-human something that has been actually connected with the oppressed. There are other things that we see as an overhuman that is also there. So this is what is non-human. And then I think when we talk about posthumanism itself, we cannot stop talking about Rosi Braidotti. So Rosi Braidotti, you all know, she's a famous posthumanist philosopher who has published so many books on posthumanist feminism, posthuman knowledge. Okay, so what is her understanding of human? So basically she tells that how the humans are being brought in, how the humans are represented through how humans are represented as a whole through the concept of Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. So she tells that there are other things that the humans can be excluded. That is like slaves, then native populations, and how women are not completely fully human. They don't fall under this post-human thing. So that is what the category she has defined. And the other thing what you see here is that how the posthumanism acts as a integral part with the nature, how it's able to connect with the human and the non-human. Okay. And next we see as in how the decentralization of human has been brought in, that is with the interdeterminants. And next one is the cyborg studies. So as you all know, cyborg is actually a human and mission concept. So when we talk about cyborg itself, first, before moving to the cyborg, we have to know who actually coined the term posthumanism. So this term posthumanism was actually put forward by a postmodern theorist, that is Hibab Hazan. So Hibab Hazan was the one who actually put forward the term that is posthumanism in his article, that is Prometheus as Performer Towards a Posthumanist Culture. So there are other things that we also saw, that is anti-humanism, how anti-humanism we come across the Louis Althusser, Michael Foucault, then Felix and Guattari. So these are some terms that has been actually associated with anti-humanism. So some of the most popular works where we can deal with post-humanism is that some of the fictional science, some of the science fictional works, that is William Gibson's Neuromancer, then Richard Powers' Galita. Okay, and when we talk about film text also, you can see Spike Jonze' Her. Okay, it's one of the famous works. So Spike Jonze' Her, we can also deal how it is been how we can deal it in a post-human aspect, and then Ex Machina. And these are some of the works, Ghost in the Shell, where we deal with the cyborg studies, or we can also deal it in a post-human aspects, as in how the human and mission having a connection. Okay, so this post-human, we all know, it actually questions how the science fiction and social reality is being represented. Okay, so it always lays a question as in how the science fiction and reality has been actually being put forward, and how the human and inhuman are being differentiated. Okay, that has been especially brought in with Donna Haraway. So Donna Haraway, we all know, she's a feminist philosopher who's famous for the work A Cyborg Manifesto. So this Cyborg Manifesto, it's combination, it's a continuing, as in it's a combination of the human, mission, and animal. So how is these three concepts is being dealt with when we talk about the Cyborg Manifesto? So what is cyborg? So cyborg is actually a human and mission entanglement. Okay, and this cyborg is being represented as a post-human because it rejects the traditional human aspects. Okay, so that is what is being defined as a cyborg, and how the cyborg is being represented as a post-human. So that is what we see when we talk about the cyborg and posthumanism studies. So next one is critical posthumanism. So this critical posthumanism. So actually in this thing, I just also want to talk about anthropocentrism. So anthropocentrism, we all know that the terms that has been actually associated with posthumanism, we see that is critical posthumanism, cultural posthumanism, and philosophical posthumanism. So in this also we come across how actually post-anthropocentrism plays a major role here. So post-anthropocentrism, you know how it's actually been connected to the environment, okay, and how it questions the nature's things. So that's what's been represented. So this critical posthumanism is where we see there are so many other things that
Sorry to
questions the.
interrupt. I'm really sorry. Could you hide that small pop-up at the bottom of the screen? Because at times it just comes in between of the content.
Which one?
The small blue one. No, like there's this pop-up, right?
That stop
Yeah.
sharing or hide that,
No, like
one?
you have to
No,
click on that
next to
hide.
stop sharing, you have hide button.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Just click on that.
I'll click on that hide button.
Yes, done.
Okay. So this critical posthumanism. So when we talk about critical posthumanism, is that in posthumanism, this critical posthumanism plays a major role here. So when we talk about the critical posthumanism, we see as in how this critical posthumanism acts as a inspiration for the ecology and environmentalism, because it's actually a contemporary thing where it's been connected to posthuman, as in only through this concept, there are so many other critical thinkers who were against the anti-humanism. So this critical posthumanism, you see, it acts as a reconfiguration of the ecology and environmentalism. So, and what is the other thing in a bigger aspect, how we can see is that it has an interconnection between the self and others, and how the human and non-human are represented. Okay, so, and it also tells as in how the rejection of individualism, the self-centered individualism is being represented. Okay, that is when we talk about the rejection, to put it in a simple terms, we come across some binaries like utopian, then dystopian, and how humanism and anti-humanism is being completely different. And so these are some of the binaries that you come across when we talk about the critical posthuman. And the next main thing when we see about critical posthumanism is the intersectional relations of power. So what is this intersectional relations of power? So when we talk about the power, we know how actually human concept is being actually connected to the power replacement, as in how it's connected to the term of power. Okay, so, and this posthumanism we see as in how it actually questions. Okay, so when we talk about the critical posthumanism, we have to see as in why there is often a question what it means to be a human, and how the problems and questions are being regarded as clusters. Okay, this is what we see when we talk about the posthumanism. So another thing that we see as in how the anthropocentric understanding of humans are represented. So will it actually questions the human authority, or will it actually be combined with the meta-narrative of human? So these are some of the things that we question when we talk about the anthropocentric point of humans. Okay, and next you come across as in how actually it's being differentiated, that otherness and difference. Okay, so when we talk about the otherness and difference, we come across how the body is being treated as a whole, that has a direct connection to the environment, and how it actually divides a stream. It actually has a divide between the subject and object. So these are how the differentiation that we see when we talk about the culture and the society, and then how self and identity is brought in, and how the effects of otherness and differences, and the body, how it's been represented as a whole, but how it has been strangled, it has been completely been moved from the environment, and why there is a divide between the subject and the object. So these are some differences that we see when we talk about the critical posthumanism. So that is one quote that actually been put forward here. That is the human is meta-Darwinianly a hybrid being both of bios and logos. So this was actually put forward by Sylvia Winter, where we've seen as in how the different aspects of human is being represented. Okay, so that is, we can see how it deals with the entanglement, then how it deals with the hybrid form, and how it actually been interdependence on the concept. So these are all the things that we see here. Okay, and this concept of interaction, we will see it when we talk about the disability studies. So this Karen Barrett, he also tells as in how the interaction plays a major role when we talk about the disability studies with the posthumanism, how actually disability plays a major role when we talk about the posthumanism concept. So there are other writers, like we all know there are some thinkers and writers who are against this posthuman concept. So one such, some of the group of writers by whom we see is the post-structuralist thinkers. So what is this post-structuralist thinkers is that they always have the thinking like the thinkers like Michael Foucault, Lacan, then Roland Barthes. So these thinkers, what they do is that they feel that the interpretation of human, it's completely in a mythological thing they feel. Okay, and that's how we see how the human itself understanding of man is completely different. That is what these post-structuralist thinkers bring in that concept. Okay, and the other writer that we come across is Katherine Hayles. So Katherine Hayles is she talks about the cybernetics. So this cybernetics is nothing but you come across how gender and embodiment is being connected. Okay, so you can also see how AI also plays a major role here. So Katherine Hayles brings in that concept. And next we will see as in how the question of human plays a major role here. So before moving to the question of major role, there are some arguments that we will see as in why posthumanism and transhumanism is being completely different, and what is the role of technology that we see when it has a direct connection to the posthuman and transhuman. So when we look it from a perspective of critical posthumanism, so we should see how the techno culture paves a way for the transhuman. So transhuman, you all know, it's been connected to the technology aspects, like how super intelligence or how AI plays a major role. That is what we see when we talk about the transhuman. But posthumanism is completely different, that we see how the human is being identified as a whole. Okay. So this critical posthumanism
Sorry
is
to
that
disturb again.
they do
I
not
think
rely on
your
the
voice is
technology. As in they do not have a effect on the technology. They completely feel that the human
Yeah,
and the
I'm so
non-human
sorry to
existence
interrupt you.
are actually
Uh,
prevalent in the 20th and 21st century. They don't care about the technology. That
Hello.
ma'am, are we audible?
is where we see they completely evolve only on the technology aspect. Okay, so this relation.
Yes.
Yeah, your
Uh,
voice is breaking and the slide just it's blank.
what, can you hear me?
Yeah, you are audible now. But can you please explain the whole post whatever you explained right now, because you were
No,
inaudible.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're audible right
Yeah.
now.
Ma'am, please explain the differences between
Okay,
posthumanism
so you
and
mean that
transhumanism again.
okay, sure, sure. Okay. So posthumanism, as in we all know, it's completely a deconstruction of human, right? But when we talk about transhumanism, we see how the technology enhancement has been becoming very popular. Okay, that is the form of AI. That is what we see the difference between the transhuman and posthuman. So this so there are
Ma'am, again your voice seems to be breaking. We can't hear
some
anything.
other things that we talk about when we talk about that other things that we see when we talk about the critical posthumanism is that we see there are other concepts like how utopianism and dystopianism is being represented, okay, and how there is some power that is being actually being questioned, okay. So this critical posthumanism we see the how the human are being understood from an anthropocentric point of view, okay. So this anthropocentric point of view, we all know that's been actually been connected to the environment and all those things. So how the humans are actually perceived, okay. So there are other thinkers like how, you know, the post-structural thinkers we come across with post-structural thinkers like Mikhail Foucault, Roland Barthes, Felix and Guattari, how they were against this critical posthumanism, okay. So why they were against this critical posthumanism is that they feel that when we talk about humanism or any critical aspects that's been connected to humanism as in posthumanism, they feel it has a different interpretation connected to the mythology. So there is a different way of thinking what these post-structuralist thinkers have the concept of posthumanism. So they feel is that these post-structuralist thinkers, they were like, posthumanism is nothing but it is a interpretation of the mythology. That is what they feel that. So especially when we talk about Friedrich Nietzsche and Sigmund Freud, they feel that how the humanist is being understanding, how they have a clear idea, the self-understanding of man is being represented. So that is what we see about critical posthuman. And when we talk about Katherine Hayles, so Katherine Hayles, you know, she's a famous posthumanist philosopher. So she has put forward in a book that is, she has put forward in a book about the cybernetics. Okay, so cybernetics, you all know it's connected to the gender, it's connected to the technology, and also how gender and technology plays a major role and how it actually been connected. So that is what we see about Katherine Hayles. So before moving to some question or something why posthumanism is being questioned, or how what are the other possible things that is being connected to posthumanism, is that we see that the techno culture, okay, so the techno culture, you know, it actually paves way for the transhuman, okay. But why not cyborg? Cyborg, you know, it's not completely a human thing, it's a combination of human and mission, okay. So that is where we come across the critical posthumanism. So this critical posthumanism we see as in how it actually has a different approach to the humanities and social science, and how the ongoing destruction of human is being represented, okay. That is through the figure of the concept of human as a whole, okay. So when we talk about the concept of human as a whole, we see how the figure of posthuman is being represented in present, in past, and how it's actually been coming in different avatars like cyborgs, zombies, monsters, or aliens, how is actually being posthuman, the figure of posthuman is represented, okay. So this is some of the things that we put forward here. So there are some questions that we talk about when we when we have some questions on posthumanism, that how did we think of ourselves as a human? In what makes us thinking that we are complete a human, okay? Or are we actually defined as a complete human? And in future things, when we talk about the future implications or future interdependence, are we actually connected with the non-human aspects? So we are not actually completely human. We are actually evolving in a post-human thing. As in, for example, we cannot be without our phones. We cannot we cannot be fidgeting with our phone. We always keep fidgeting with our phones and we do everything. So are we actually turning into a cyborg? So cyborg is actually, you all know, it's a continuum of human and mission. So we are not actually being recognized as a full human. We are actually being moving forward toward a post-human concept. So that's where we think ourselves, are we actually, when we talk about this post-humanism, there are three different questions that we actually have to put forward. The first one is that how actually we think ourselves of becoming a human. And the next one is that how we exactly defines to be human, as in what it actually means to be a human, okay? And then we come across as in what are the future relationships as in with the non-human aspects. So non-human thing we may come across like animals, the plants, the environment. So how are we actually connected to them? In what way are we actually connected to them? So are we completely human? Because we are not. We are always having an interconnection with the other things. So that is where the question arises here. So for today's thing, the background of posthumanism is being dealt. Yeah, so
Right.
the posthumanism, as in for today's session is being dealt with the theoretical background. So tomorrow I'll be dealing with as in how the gender and cyborg studies plays a major role with connection to the other concepts of posthumanism like post-dualism, metahumanism. So these are some of the concepts that how it plays a major role when we talk about the gender and cyborg studies. So thank you, sir. And any questions or?
Thank you, Fenster. Participants, we make the floor open for questions. If you have any, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
Yes, but little more understanding is needed for this post-humanistic approach. As far as it seems that many out there have not understand what post-humanism. The concept is
Dr. Sunil
truly
Jyoti, you're
unclear.
not
Yes.
clearly audible.
Yeah.
Would it be possible for you to drop it in a chat box?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Meanwhile, we can have question from any other participant. We have two hands raised, I think. Aruna Priya and Tarlochan ji. We also have Dhanush. Please, anyone from you?
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, good evening.
Ma'am, first of all, like before I ask my question, it was a good session and it was a very good overview on various theoretical backgrounds that is related to post-human studies. And like, is there any possibility that like we could get to know about any famous or landmark writers whose fictional works, fictional works, I mean, fictional writers who pioneer in this, in writings that deals with post-humanities or transhumanism or more of a speculative kind of writers, ma'am?
Okay, so when we talk about post-humanism itself, there are some science fiction things that you come across. As in, if you're looking from a contemporary point of view, there are some writers where you come across like Octavia Butler is actually a renowned writer where you come across a Xenogenesis trilogy. If you have read the Xenogenesis trilogy or Wild Seed or Dawn, that is where you come across how the post-human as can be dealt in Octavia Butler's novel, or you can come across as mentioned in one of my favorite writer, that is Pat Cadigan. She's actually a contemporary writer and her books are actually very rare. But if you read some of her works like Sinners, you come across how actually post-humanism is being dealt in how human and mission plays a major role and how technoscience or technology is being brought in there. And some writers like Don DeLillo and then William Gibson's Neuromancer, then Anne Leckie's Ancillary Justice. For example, if you are looking from a point of AI, okay, as in about AI concepts, as in how AI and posthumanism can be dealt, that is in the form of transhumanism, you can bring in Don DeLillo's Zero K, or you can also bring in Ancillary Justice. So these are some of the works where we focus on post-human as well as transhuman.
Sorry to interrupt again. Could you please spell the names of the last two persons that you mentioned?
It's Anne Leckie. It's Anne Leckie, Ancillary Justice. Maybe I'll just type it here so that you can just look into it.
Or
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
you can drop a WhatsApp message to me later on. I'll share it with participants, Fenster.
Okay, sure, sure, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. That was really informative.
Thank you, Dhanush. We can move to next question. Snehashish. Okay. Nishant.
Hello,
Anjali.
good evening, ma'am.
Ji.
Yeah, good evening.
Actually, I am trying to understand more about this Anthropocene posthumanism. Could you throw some light on that, ma'am?
So Anthropocene is like how it's about the human connection with the environment, literally like some eco-critical thing we come across, as in it questions the human embodiment when it comes to the nature, when it comes to the connection with the natural world. That's what we see.
Actually, I have thought of like taking up my research on this particular field. I have planned to choose the fiction of Amitav Ghosh, The Hungry Tide, and I
Okay.
want to highlight this particular Anthropocene
You can
posthumanism there.
also take in,
So,
when we talk about Anthropocene, you can also deal with Amitav Ghosh, The Gun Island.
the Gun Island.
The
Okay,
Gun
okay,
Island,
ma'am.
or you can also take, if you're looking from an Indian writer point of view, the most works of Amitav Ghosh, the contemporary works like The Great Derangement, The Gun Island. So this is, you can
Derangement,
look
yes.
it from a post-human anthropocentric point of view.
Got it, man. Now, ma'am, one small suggestion I want from you. Can you
Yeah.
suggest me any particular book from where I can get more information about this particular field, Anthropocene posthumanism?
Anthropocene. Maybe I'll just forward in the, as in the end of the FDP, I will just forward some references in the end where you'll be able to connect, as in some reference material for posthumanism, then post anthropocentrism. So there will be some references in the end. I will attach in the slide. I'll forward it
Okay,
to
ma'am, got it.
Pradyuman sir. You can take it from sir.
Sure, sure, ma'am, sure. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, Fenster, we have one description in a chat box from a person named Safir. His name is
Okay.
Scholar in Google Meet. Just request you to go through the description. It's second last comment.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not a question that we explain the terms with immediate examples. Enhancement of the context. Okay. So when we talk about the different concepts that we see when we, as we all know, transhumans connected to the technology, and we all know. But posthumanism, the best thing what I would suggest is that, see, posthumanism is not just only one term. There are so many terms that has been actually been associated with posthuman. So the best thing what I would suggest, since there are the time is short, I'll not be able to elaborate on all the concepts, but I would suggest you that it's very evident that where you come across Francesca Ferrando's YouTube lecture where she elaborates on all the concepts of posthumanism. As in detail, she tells as in how, what is post-dualism and what is actually critical posthumanism, cultural posthumanism. So these are some of the things that we see. So posthumanism, we all know it's completely a deconstruction of human. So the best thing is that we know how actually we are not completely human. We are actually been evolving into a technology thing. Okay, so that is how the posthuman has been defined. So the best example for posthuman is the cyborgs, where we all know cyborgs, we are actually evolving as a cyborg. So that is where we are defined as a post-human, because we are not actually completely a human thing. We are actually, we talk, we connect with the people through phones, through social medias. So these are how we actually know. To put it in simple words, the cyborg is how being defined as a post-human. That is the best example when we talk about the post-human.
We have one question from Rajendra. Is posthumanism an advocacy of feminism?
Not really, but feminism is that is another thing that we talk about when we focus on posthuman, that is humanist feminism. So as I told about Lucy Irigaray, where she tells about how the woman is being represented as a whole, but at the same time how women is being completely devoid of being a human. Okay, so I think feminism and posthumanism is actually a different thing, but you will be able to connect if you're looking from a feminist point of view. You can look into as in how cyber feminism plays a major role, because cyber feminism, you all know, as in how human and how women is been taking a major role when we talk about the cyberspace or technology. So that is how cyber feminism plays a major role. So when we talk about feminism, you can look in from that point of view, how women plays a major role when we talk about the cyberspace, the cyber culture, or the digital technologies, how women has been represented, that you can look it from a cyber feminist point of view.
Okay. Can posthumanism theory be studied, can be used to study global challenges like pandemics or climate change?
I'm not sure about the pandemics, but you can look it in climate change. You can also deal with, yeah, as in climate perspective, you can also deal it, like the disasters or pandemics, not pandemics, the disastrous effects that can also be dealt in. Maybe I'll just refer to about the climate change, and then I'll let you know, as in how climate plays climate fiction can be dealt in a post-humanist perspective.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
I had a question regarding Anthropocene.